Introducing the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat. Do you have a question from any of the following areas? Land survey, valuation, building survey, land administration, engineering survey, estate agency, property management, and geospatial information management. Join the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat every Friday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Institution of Surveyors live chat. We call it the ISK live chat. It happens every Friday from 2 o'clock. Usually the event is streamed live on Facebook and YouTube. Therefore, wherever you are watching from, you can always drop us your comments, your complaints, and compliments, if any. Today, we are going to talk about green buildings and their management. However, with your indulgence, I would like to introduce myself and also talk about the Building Surveyors Registration Board before we go into the main arena. First, about myself. I'm a building surveyor by training. Studied land economy at the University of Nairobi. And also studied project management, construction management at the University of Reading in the UK. And my first posting was the Ministry of Public Works in 1980. So I have a lot of excitement to talk about those years. But today, let's see how far we've come with the building surveyors. The Building Surveyors Registration Board originated from government. And the whole idea was government had invested so much. It's conservatively estimated that it's about $3.5 trillion of investment. Okay? Of course, that could easily be matched by the private sector who have invested almost the same. In fact, maybe more of late. So government's role in the built environment is done through the Building Surveyors Board in terms of ensuring that the policies are in place, that the laws are in place, and to the extent where we actually have the Building Surveyors Act that came into effect in January of 2019. What's government's obligation to the built environment? Make sure the assets are good, not just for use, but equally the image and reputation. Let's face it, you don't want a situation where when you see a building, it tells the story of that is government building. Disrepute. In addition to that, even the people in the private sector, including the banking industry, the warehousing and so on, even them, they would like to have a good image for where they do their work, where they conduct their business and so on. The World Bank has come up with a model for resilience in buildings. We'll be sharing that. Then now I'll come to the beef, which is the notion of the green buildings and their management. What does it imply? There is a philosophy about green buildings design. There's also the economics aspect, the life cycle costing, from design to demolition. All that is spent. And we need to know, as good investors, that you want to make a profit. That's why you're in the business. So then we'll talk about the benefits of green building and the maintenance of the built environment. And then we'll talk about the LEED, which is the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And finally, before we'll talk about green buildings in Kenya. Are they catching traction? Building Surveying Registration Board is really concerned with the maintenance of the built environment. The Building Surveyors Board is a regulatory body, a public organization, government agency set up to exercise a regulatory function. This function involves imposing requirements, conditions, or restrictions, and setting the standards for these activities. It also entails enforcing these areas or obtaining compliance. In all cases, the purpose is to maintain a safe, secure, comfortable, convenient built environment in the public interest to assure confidence in use. So the World Bank has come up with this life cycle and government interventions. It starts from hazard assessment and zoning. So when you are putting the building together, you're wondering, should it face north-south or east-west? And is there a wind, cross winds and so on, before you even come to the issue of design. Then there's the construction. What materials are you choosing? Are they components, do they gel together well? And in the event of a challenge, can they withstand? Does it give the occupant the opportunity, if there's a disaster, to make way to go to the assembly center and be counted? All that happens during use and maintenance. Then over time, things change. There's change of user sometimes, there's change of occupancy, and sometimes even change of taste, because human beings, we tend to change things like that. And the buildings have to be modified to what they call retrofitting to meet the new tastes and requirements. And sometimes these are anchored in law. Then, of course, finally, there's the decommissioning. And even that needs to be done safely. Whatever material can be reused will be used so that we have less wastage. And that's the whole point about green buildings, that we have to be very environmentally sensitive to how we are designing the buildings, first how we are planning them, how we are designing them, how we are constructing them, even how we are using them. And I feel that there's sometimes the loss of narrative, because people are so desperate to move into a house. Maybe it's an office they want to start working, or COVID has changed the narrative now, or they want to have a space to live. And there's no time to sometimes just decongest, or there's a term that is used for that. I think it's called debriefing, to get somebody to understand this is here, this building, you're entering this building, here is the manual, the maintenance manual, the list of things, the do's and don'ts, the warranties, name it. Even about the plumbing, about the power, and most of all, in the event of an emergency, how do you exit? Okay? So, what does green building imply? It refers to both the structure and the application of processes that are environmentally responsible, resource efficient, and resilient and not wasteful. We don't want just to waste space or to waste material. We want to use it carefully, because a lot of these things are not renewable. And throughout a building's life cycle, the planning to design, construction, and so on, it really matters a lot how we are applying economy, how we are applying utility, how we are assuring that whoever uses the building is comfortable with it, is safe. And here I have in mind even the people with disabilities. And for that purpose, the Building Surveyors Board will be looking at what they call accessibility audit. Are the buildings accessible to everybody, every citizen? Are they to children? When you come to public buildings like schools, like hospitals, like colleges, you find we sometimes overlook the idea that it will be used by many at any one time. It's not like a house where there's just one person entering. This is a public utility and has to be designed to reflect that. What does it imply? It also requires that there has to be close cooperation at all stages of the project, by the contractor, by the architect, the engineers, the quantity surveyors, and of course the client. But in the middle of all this mix, sometimes you forget the Cinderella of the industry, the building surveyor. Cinderella are not my words, that's Ivor Seeley's words. He says the building surveyor who takes over the building after construction is rarely, if ever, consulted, and yet they know intimately how a building operates, how the materials function, how the components will be under certain stress, if there's a fire, if there's a flood, and so on. So what else does it imply? The green building practice refers to expansion and complements the classical building design. It concerns the economy, the utility, durability, and comfort. And in so doing, it embraces the three dimensions of sustainability. One is the planet, the footprint. The other is the people, and ultimately the profit. We cannot go into designing and investing in a building if the intention is to make a loss. So across all these supply chains, the whole thing needs to be considered is how is a building going to function to make it profitable for everybody. Again, we can talk about how the green buildings are designed in the philosophy of preserving and improving the natural environment, which should be integrated into the design and is implied in the construction, in the operation and the use, and finally, the deconstruction of the built environment, in such a way that it uses energy, water, and the environment in a sustainable manner. The whole notion of sustainability is a word we hear often, and all it means is that you use the resources in such a way that the next generation, the future generation, has also something to fall back on. Let's not consume it and finish it completely. We need to have the next generation, our children, their children, and their children's children will also have access to the same resources we are talking about. Hence, the philosophy of green buildings. Green buildings use materials which put the least load on non-renewable resources. Least load. They use alternative energy sources like daylight and solar energy to heat and cool the building. Of late, particularly in Sweden, they're even trying to use the wave energy, using the waves of the sea to see how that can be harnessed in the built environment. And as we are talking all this, we also have to be sure that we are talking about protecting the health of the occupants, which I'll come to when we talk about COVID-19. The green buildings, we have to divert much of the waste materials and water for recycling. Hence the philosophy of the green building. It's always like that we talk about reduce, reuse, and recycle. Those three R's really reflect what green buildings should be. And what are the elements of the green building? The commissioning with the feedback control loop from the building surveyor, who will be saying, this choice of materials under certain conditions works well. In other conditions, it may not work well. This wiring system doesn't work well. And it's not just you and I, your house and mine. The whole community also needs to be involved. What the environmental footprint are we looking about? What about the energy? And I've referred to solar, wind, and wave energy. In this country, in Kenya, near Lake Turkana, there's one of the world's biggest wind farms. And that to me, wind is nice, God-given. If we can use more of that, all the better. If you go into the house itself, the building, whether it's an office or it's a home, it's where is the air quality? How is it? Have you been to certain buildings and you find the ambience is sometimes wanting? You feel choked because there's no, natural ventilation and so on. Then there's the whole issue about marketability. If a building is meeting those basic standards of air quality, good air quality, energy use, and the community is sensitive, you'll find it can attract a higher premium in terms of rent. If the materials used are renewable and locally available, then we don't need to worry about going to import materials from wherever, which costs money and is not easily reusable, is not easily replaceable. You find sometimes when it fails, then you have to find another way of maybe compromising on the visibility and the quality itself. What about the site and the orientation? Again, that's a big deal here, because if the site choice is not properly analyzed, you might find that maybe, like happened in Lake Baringo, where a lot of the buildings in the hotel industry are now submerged in water. How did we get to that? Of course, people talk about climate change and so on. But we in the built environment should be clear that that should have been anticipated. Of course, it's not the time now to blame game. This is not the time for blame game. We're just saying we need to work together so that the final product is sustainably usable. What are the benefits of green building? In return to green buildings, we know that they produce better productivity. If of late, people have had to work from home, it's easier if the environment, the atmosphere is comfortable, as opposed to how it has been here, where we only go home to sleep. Now we are forced to work from home. So the productivity has to be the same or higher if the building is well thought out, well designed. There should be more efficient use of energy and water, savings on power and utility costs, and we know that power expenses have gone through the roof in this country. If we can have renewable sources, geothermal, energy like solar and so on, it actually generates a better indoor environment. It also enhances the green cover around the buildings, which is very key for what they call the urban microclimate, which has been a challenge. Research has shown that sometimes there's a big difference between the climate in the urban area and the climate external away because of that urban microclimate effect. Overall improvement in functioning of the community also surrounding the place makes it better for everybody, because we are talking about community living. We are talking about you and I being your brothers or your sister's keeper. Okay? So a little cost as little as possible, of course, the environment. There are programs such as the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, which provide ratings for green buildings. But it's not as common in this country. In fact, we don't even have a law leading to that, but it should encourage market interest in developing this field. I've referred to life cycle costing, and really I'm just referring to, it's not just the one-off cost. It's when you are planning, what cost implications? When you are choosing the materials, is what cost implications? The workmanship you're using. You are talking about people sometimes compromising on the workmanship, and in the process, the product is not any more exciting. Then it comes to construction, you find again there's a compromise in terms of choice of materials, in terms of workmanship, in terms of supervision, and it shows in the product. Sometimes you find very brand new buildings have to be renovated at a great expense because there wasn't a thoughtful way of saying, how does this perform? And then when it's being used, when the building or the structure is being used, the built environment, you find operations and maintenance costs could go skyroof. It could be very expensive if it's not been well thought out, it's not been allowed to say, hey, what if? And there's a whole notion in this country, in the literature, about something called whataboutism. How about something else? Couldn't we have thought of something else in doing this? Life cycle costing of the built environment, it could be a commercial building, it could be a residential building, or it could be warehousing, it could even be a special purpose structure, for example, a stadium. It could be a nightclub, could be a church, could be a mosque. All this, really, we have to look at how easy and how convenient is it to keep it clean, to keep it safe, to keep it secure at all times, because human beings are human, they're going to use it. Yeah? All these require maintenance in order to meet the standards of safety, security, comfort, convenience, and even statutory standards as put in law. For example, what they call the Work and Health and Safety Act. There's the issue of lighting, there's the issue of signage, plumbing, space management. And again, COVID taught us many exciting lessons. There's the issue of the broken window theory, which just says that if there's a window broken, the chances are other windows will also break unless you fix that in time. We talk about a stitch in time, saving 9. And here we're talking about what there's a responsibility of the economy between the owner of the building and the user, between the landlord and the tenant. Where there's a short-term lease, you find 1 to 2 years, the responsibility of upkeep is usually the inside or the interior falls on the tenant. The landlord then is responsible for the exterior. But it's not always quite clear because a built envelope has got the components, sometimes they come together as one, and it's impossible to just tell where one starts and where one ends. If it's medium term, again, the landlord has a responsibility for the outside. But if it's long term, and here I'm thinking about the Kenya Wildlife Service, who invited private investors to build lodges and hotels in the national parks. In that case, all responsibility for maintenance falls on the tenant. You're talking about a 25, 30-year lease. So really, the KWS would only be coming to establish that the agreed standards of maintenance are used. Of course, there's the issue of fair wear and tear, and again, that is something debatable. Again, we have the issue, and this is very common in this country, between developers and the sellers through the estate agents and the buyers. And you'll find everybody, the developer is as keen as possible to complete the project and sell it. And sometimes to the extent where the issue of defect liability period is overlooked. And we are agitating that we should have warranties for certain aspects of the built environment. So that a buyer, an innocent buyer, does not spend his or her lifetime savings, and then when the push comes to shove, when they move in, the doors are creaking, things are not holding together. And they have to go back into their savings, and if they have exhausted their savings, maybe take a loan so that they can put right what ought to have been right in the first place. The choice of materials and components generally, the Ministry of Infrastructure, Transport, Housing, Urban Development, and Public Works is working on ways to protect the investors and the developers. And this is important because we are looking at, it's one of the biggest employers, the construction industry. So the more we have with meeting the threshold of standards, the better for everybody. Everybody benefits. Everybody benefits. There are types of maintenance I would like to talk about, and these add value. Again, some people seem to feel, and this is common, that when you spend money on maintenance, it's waste. It's like what they call a sunk cost. No, it is to sustain the value of that asset so that you can use it longer. If you want to sell it, to fetch a higher price, and so on. This value addition issue is critical for the maintenance of the built environment. And so I'd just like to, I can't talk deeply about each of them, but there's the whole issue of routine maintenance, which is minor maintenance. Cleaning, very key, but usually neglected. It leaves the environment smelling good and feeling good. Then there's the issue of corrective maintenance. These are repair works which happen. It could either be because of badly used components or just fair wear and tear. But corrective maintenance is one of those practices that you can't run away from. And then there's, of course, the major maintenance. And this is periodic and can be planned. Because every 5 years, according to the law, a building is then supposed to be repainted and all those, and inspected and conditioned, what we call condition survey, so to get to know are the components meeting the agreed standards. And we also have emergency maintenance. This is usually unexpected. It could be a terrorist attack. It could be a natural happening, but the point is it needs to be repaired quickly. Example, if the sewage is full, if there's a fire out of maybe an electric fire and so on, it's something that cannot wait. It was not planned for. So usually what we recommend is to have a contingency sum put aside for just that purpose. Over time, you'll find that the built environment does not, then the standards sort of tend to fall, or people's tastes change and so on. So you have to address it through improved maintenance, where you retrofit, the spaces required is bigger and so on. The question is, who's responsible for that? I've talked about everything else, but we should really talk a little more about disasters. And what comes to mind right now is, as much as there is man-made disaster and natural disasters, the biggest elephant in the room today is COVID-19. And the challenges that COVID-19 has brought to our doors has shown the underbelly of the whole built environment. You find that people are told, stay home. But staying home and the environment or the atmosphere in the home is not comfortable can be challenging. Schools have had to close because they are not meeting that minimum standard of safety. We talk about social distancing and so on. Those days it used to be exam cheating, but now it's worse than that. Your life depends on a certain minimum distance between yourself and the next person. Of course, in a way, this has brought to bear that there are opportunities that when we want to build back, we'll build better. And that depends on the feedback of the building surveyor. What lessons have we learned? We've learned that we've been weak in terms of assuring, as ourselves, even including individuals and companies and even government. We've learned that we need to have a maintenance policy that addresses all these issues, contingencies, and so on, and maintenance laws. There is the whole law about health and safety at work. We are aware, for example, that when people are working in a big warehouse, there should be good ventilation, good natural lighting, so that people their health is guaranteed. But let's face it, have we really made the mark in that respect? I wouldn't say. Because you'll find there was the case celebrated, it's not a case to celebrate, but a matter of a warehouse where the owner of the property locked up the warehouse so that people can continue working while he went home. So they worked all night. Unfortunately, one of those days there was a fire. And you can imagine the disaster, the consequences. There was no escape route. Some people lost their lives and so on. And these are citizens who are looking for a livelihood. So some of those things, we need to go into the idea of regular inspections, regular condition survey, to assure ourselves that it's meeting the health and safety at work standards. Another, not so long ago, there was this issue of Nakumatt lifestyle. No. It was Nakumatt downtown, which is opposite the Stanley Hotel. And there was a fire. It said that the generator overheated and exploded and caused a fire. That's sad enough. What is worse is that the people were shopping when this happened. The people could not run away. They couldn't, because somewhere where there's supposed to be exit, a sign, yes, there is a sign, but somehow the management have blocked off that. So when people are trying to take off, they find another wall. They can't run away. People died. You can imagine how horrid that was. Which brings us the idea that indeed there has to be a policy that says periodically, very regularly, all public buildings must be maintained, must be inspected and certified. And that certificate put at the entrance. So that you and I, when we are going shopping, the first thing we want to see is a certificate indicating this building is occupiable, this building is safe, this building is secure, and in the event of an exit, you can get off easily. Those are standards that we want to inculcate into our people. And it's going to take a lot of awareness campaigns, which the Building Surveyors Board is working on. We want to go to all the counties, speak to the leadership in those counties, and just point out some of the weak links in this real estate investment cycle. That a lot of things, we actually, it's God's grace that is allowing us to do what we do in this country. Because if not, if there was a challenge, if there was a disaster, it would be horrible. Case in point, at the University of Nairobi's education school in Kikuyu, where there was an explosion and students were running away. One jumped, because panic and so on. Because we never conduct regular drills, fire drills, and so on, to assure that, yes, the facility is well built, it's got enough space, it's well lit, and we also know what to do in the event of an emergency. We don't do that. Another case in point is in Kakamega, where primary school children, there was a stampede. It's never been quite explained why the children need to run so quickly, but the point is some died, something which is avoidable. And we should be working towards standards where we guarantee a parent, when you take your child to school, they'll come back safely. Not taking the child to school and then you find they come back in a coffin. Finally, I would like to talk a little bit about the green buildings in Kenya and in East Africa generally. Is it widespread? I wonder. The jury is out there. Is it viable? Definitely. So the answer is, why is it not as widespread as it should be? And one of them is just the absence of information. In other countries, we've read how there's the whole thing about Green Building Council in the US, Green Building Council in Canada, Green Building Council in India, Green Building Council in South Africa. In Kenya, we are now beginning to have that. And it's being led by a very enthusiastic building surveyor who, in the fullness of time, will be one of our ambassadors going out to the counties and talking about green buildings and how they really make a difference in terms of performance, in terms of profits, and in terms of the footprint. There is also the challenge of professional indiscretion, where somebody knows something but they'll not share for whatever reason. And this information, some of it should just be out there so that everybody knows. It's not a question of saying, oh, if I have this information, then it should only benefit me. That is ridiculous. That's ridiculous. It's even self-defeating, okay? We should have education and awareness the same way we are talking about Building Bridges Initiative. We should also be talking about building back better. Building what the space we live in, our homes, that they should have the same amount of airtime, the same amount of opportunity like you are doing at BBI. Why? Because truly, we're going to have politics on the one side, but we don't need politics. We don't. People need the bread and butter, the food, the mboga, the managu, the what. They need that on a daily basis. And people just know that, yes, we have this, and it's for everybody. We don't want the issue of knowledge being limited to the elites. That's one of our challenges and one of our greatest failures, because it's not inclusive as it should. And maybe that's why we have limited the green buildings, much as they're very useful. There's the rainwater harvesting and so on. But no, because some people, we tend to think we should be inward looking and not outward looking. Talking about rainwater harvesting, you might wonder, why has it not taken root as it should have? And we have a sad history about that. During the struggle for independence, our heroes, it's rumored, I can't put a finger on it, but it's rumored that the colonizers were afraid that they would have their water poisoned. So they didn't want to conserve water because, the Mau Mau heroes could easily put something in there and kill the colonizer. So, and that has permeated to date, that it's something we need to rework on, re-engineer, to encourage people to actually preserve water, to harvest the water when it rains, so they can use it during the drought. There's been a sense of inertia and also the fear of the unknown. and conversions, meaning that it costs more money. I've already spent so much, I can't spend more. I've had to take a loan and so on. So it's an area that we need to explore as an industry, because truly it has the potential for higher employment, for better health, for everything good will happen if we let it take its course as it should. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Let's see what other people have done, what the other countries have done to meet those standards. How have they, for example, given their gold standards, their platinum standards, where if a building is inspected and meets those parameters, it should fetch a higher return on the owner, for the owner. And it's not easy, but can be done. Finally, I want to talk about the leadership, energy, and environmental design. And what we're talking about, what's this leadership in energy and environmental? It's an internationally recognized green building certification system. It provides third-party verification that a building or community was designed and built using strategies aimed at improving performance across all the metrics that matter the most. 1 is about energy saving. 2 is about water efficiency. 3 is about CO2 or carbon dioxide emission reduction. 4 is about the improved indoor environmental quality. 5 is about the stewardship of resources used. And 6 is about the sensitivity to their impact on the future generations to come. This has not taken root in this country yet, but it's about time. It should have started yesterday. We need to have that LE practiced. Perhaps the Kenya's Green Building Society, which is in its infancy, but has got a very enthusiastic CEO, should now take the lead in this, so that we also have the Kenya Green Building Council, and also with its own parameters, assuring that any buildings that are coming up meet those green building standards. And those which are existing are given a period during which they need to improve so they meet the required standards. Just living to, they take it for granted. Unaingia nyumba, unatoka, and so on. But there are some nuances that go with that. Is it convenient? Is it comfortable? Are you happy when in there? Or is it just something you want to go in, sleep, and look for the next day? In between, you can't write a story about it because there's no story to write. The kitchen is leaking, the roof is not well fixed, it doesn't breathe, the toilet, you have to go in sideways, It doesn't make sense. So those are areas of feedback that we are working on, so that we encourage people to be sensitive to the place they live in, not compromising on their safety, on their health, for heaven's sake. Let them be happy where they're staying. Of course, there's the corollary of that is sometimes you're so happy you want to keep staying in bed. We want people to go out there and work. But of course, there's the notion of working from home. If you're going to work from home, as we must in this COVID-19 days, the environment, the atmosphere has to be absolutely attractive and exciting. There's no compromise about that. And now we are sort of cornered. And we know that over time, we'll improve the inward space, the quality of it, so that people, when they work from home, their productivity is even higher than when they work from the offices. Are you aware, for example, that the rentals have gone down by almost 40%? Why? Because most people are working from home. So the commercial buildings have challenges. But I see a ray of light in that. Why don't we have those commercial buildings turn into residentials? Because we have a clear shortage of residential. So then people can have commercial buildings, which at the same time are residential. Yeah, I think it's something we should think about. So we don't always have that notion of a dormitory town like Limuru, like Machakos, like Thika, Nyeri even, Kajiado, where people come here. Let them live and work in Nairobi. And Nairobi's economy will grow up. And then we'll have that vision that I thought about when I was at NCBDA, a 24-hour economy. Flourishing, exciting to live in, and booming for everybody. It really will be very exciting. Really, there is no law now, and it's part of the regulations that the Building Surveyors Registration Board is working on, which will then accentuate the Building Surveyors Act, that every building must have that certificate to indicate that the building is meeting those required standards of safety, of security, of environmental quality, and so on and so on. It's not there now, but it's a desirable, it's like, more than desirable. I would consider it, I think it's mandatory that all buildings should have that. It will give comfort to you and I when you go shopping. Before you start picking the basket to go and buy things, you first check, do they have a certificate of safety? And when they do, then you feel happy about it. Those who don't have will also lose business. So they'll also be encouraged to have the same certification, which doesn't come without initial condition survey. And where they now have a ticking box where you say, this is there, this is meeting that, this is not meeting that standard, can we have it within the next 3 weeks? You are given a notice. That way, we improve the life for every Kenyan. We improve the life of even the investor themselves, and ultimately the whole nation. So yes, it's something we are working on. The county governments must have their own reasons, but I don't think they have anything to do with green building. I feel that mainly it's for aesthetics. Mainly it's for aesthetics. Does it look nice? But personally, and even talking about, as chair of the board, I'll be looking at, beyond looking nice, how does it perform? How is it reflected in the people who live there? Are they more healthy? Are they safer? Are we given space for walking, non-motorized transport? Those kind of things. Is the atmosphere conducive for children to play? You know, to me, I think that takes a higher priority than just painting. But again, we are in the process of trying to find out why it's necessary to do that. Maybe it's a marketing gimmick. If you go to Marrakesh, it's called the Red City. All the buildings are red, okay? And there are visitation of tourists. You're looking at approximately easily 20 million. Kenya will not reach there. This is Marrakesh, one city in Morocco, getting so many guests, but I don't think it's about the painting. There are other factors. The Atlas Mountains, the deserts, something called Jema Elfna, a place where it's 24 hours, but the snake charmers, the things which make people want to come out and enjoy. Of course, we are limited by something called coffee in this country. So, so that one, it's, I think, futuristic. But for the time being, let's just say we are kind of limited with that. With those few remarks, I just want to say thank you, and I expect questions now. Thank you very much.
Introducing the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat. Do you have a question from any of the following areas? Land survey, valuation, building survey, land administration, engineering survey, estate agency, property management, and geospatial information management. Join the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat every Friday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.